Easy one-pot meals that don't suck, that you actually want to make, that you'll actually enjoy. Starting off breakfast with the potato and sausage skillet. And at the heart of it are Yukon Golds. Don't use a russet. If you're going to use something different than Yukon Golds, use like a fingerling or something. But also don't use a fingerling because they're like 3 or 4 times the price of Yukon Golds and it's not worth it. Start by cutting your potatoes up into small little pieces. It doesn't really matter how big they are, but just keep in mind that the bigger that you cut them, the longer they're going to take to cook. You really just want them all the same size so that way they cook evenly. And once you have all those cut up, you just want to go ahead and rinse them under some cool water a few times, because as you can see, that water is still really starchy and we want to get rid of as much of that as possible. And once that water's running clear, go ahead and strain them and then dry them off. The drier you can get the surface, the better seerage you'll end up on each and every potato. And we're just gonna move that back into the bowl. Then we're just gonna hit that with a little bit of olive oil, some garlic powder, a little smoked paprika. Oh, too much smoked paprika, that's fine. It'll taste the same. It won't, but it'll be okay. And a little bit of oregano. And then don't forget the salt. And they're potatoes, so don't be afraid to salt heavy because potatoes suck in the salt. And black pepper. And then just give those a good toss until they're all nice and evenly coated. And by all means, if you just wanna use a rub or a spice mix, like, do that. Like, that's fine. I use that stuff all the time. Today, I decided not to. If you do it yourself, you're just gonna have a little bit more control. But if you have a spice blend that you really like, just use that. It'll work. Your potatoes should look evenly seasoned. Now we're gonna cut up half of a very large yellow onion. You could also just do like 1 yellow onion if it was a reasonable size yellow onion, but mine was large, uncomfortably large. Then we're just gonna roughly dice this by cutting along the grains and then cutting against the grains, like this. Then we also have a red bell pepper that I can't seem to rip the top off of. Oh, there we go. Yank that bad boy out. By all means, don't use a red one. Use whatever color bell pepper you want. Also, there's a trash can over there. I don't want you to think I'm just like dumping it out on the floor like a madman. That would be ridiculous. I'm gonna pick those up now. And make sure you cut out most of that inside membrane. You don't really want that. And then we're just gonna roughly chop it the same way we did the onion. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect, just roughly the same size, so that way it all cooks in roughly the same amount of time. And last but not least, our Polska kielbasa. Once you have them into cut in little discs, you can leave them like this. I prefer to cut them in half because I think that way you get a little bit more, it's a little bit more bite size, it's not so large. In every bite of a breakfast skillet, you wanna make sure that you're getting even distribution of everything. And now for our one pot. I'm using cast iron enamel. You can use cast iron, you could use stainless, don't use non-stick, but you could use anything you want. We're gonna start by bringing that up to a medium-high heat. And then while that's heating up, go ahead and add in your sausage so that way it slowly renders out all that fat and you don't have to use anything excess. Make sure they're nice and spread so that way there's even coverage all around. After a few minutes at high heat and it really starts to sizzle, go ahead and start moving it around and make sure you get all the sides nice and charred up. And after a few minutes, and once you've got that nice char built up, go ahead and put them back in the bowl once they came. And now depending on how fatty of a meat that you just cooked, you may need to add a little more oil. So I'm just gonna add in a little bit more oil to make sure that my potatoes don't stick and they get a nice crust. All right, now we're just gonna push those all in, spread them out nice and even, and then bring your heat down to medium to let them cook through. Once your potatoes are about 3/4 of the way through, make sure you scrape all those flavor bits off the bottom. Mine's looking a little dry, so I'm gonna add a little bit more olive oil, and then with our onions and peppers. And you might be thinking, man, it took a really long time to cook your potatoes. It's true. Potatoes take a really long time on the stove. So if you wanted to, you also have the option to just put the whole thing in the oven, especially if you're using cast iron, that works fine. I just like to do that because in the oven gets the house hot, and then I'm hot, and it's not great. I don't have air conditioning, so make sure those are nicely mixed and broken up. You don't want these to cook down too much because you still want a little bit of crunch from them since your potato's gonna be soft and your meat's gonna be soft. And once those have started to get just a little bit limp, go ahead and take a bite and check for salt. In my case, I need a little more salt. And now that our potatoes are basically cooked through and our onions and peppers are almost right where we want them, sausage, get that nice and mixed up. Then we're just gonna reduce our heat down a little bit, get it nice and evenly spread. Grate over top a nice thin layer of melty cheese. Feel free to use whatever you want. I'm using Odobera, but really you can just use whatever you want as long as it's nice and melty. Now we'll just crack on some eggs, carefully placing them around. Hit those with a little bit of salt. And then we're just gonna cover it and let it cook just until the whites are set. And then I totally forgot, but you may also want to slice up some green onions to garnish the top. You don't have to, but the option's there. And if you're having trouble with your eggs setting and taking too long, just pour a little bit of water down the side just to add a little bit extra steam. And after about 4 minutes, your eggs should be nice and set. Ooh, cheese melting. And then garnish the top with some of those green onions that you totally remembered to cut up in the beginning. The breakfast skillet. Next Next up for lunch, soy glazed chicken and rice. It's not teriyaki chicken. It's sort of like teriyaki chicken, but it's not. You're gonna start off with some bone-in, skin-on chicken thighs. If you're really against bone-in, skin-on, that's fine. You don't have to use bone-in, skin-on, but all this skin is flavor, and that bone right there, it's also flavor. You don't have to eat the bone though, obviously. And even though we're going bone-in, skin-on, we're gonna still trim off some of these extra little bits that we don't necessarily want to be munching on. Like this little extra piece of skin, which is totally edible and you can use and cook with, but it's just a small little piece that I don't wanna deal with today. Like this piece right here, we don't want that. That's a lot of skin. It's a lot of fat. You want them to be nice and uniform and the skin to go edge to edge, nothing more, nothing less. Now for our marinade, you can definitely just do it straight in the bowl, but we're using sugar, so it's gonna be hard to get it all together and equally mixed up if we're doing it with the chicken. So instead, we're using a different bowl. Starting off with a good amount of soyu, about a quarter cup, a few tablespoons of brown sugar, a splash of mirin, some grated ginger, and 2 to 4 cloves of grated garlic, depending on how much you like life. And of course, a bit of salt and white pepper this time. And be very gentle with white pepper, because it goes a long way. Then we're just gonna mix this all up until it's nice and evenly combined. And if you stick your pinky out, it scientifically works better. And then once that sugar is mostly dissolved in there, go ahead and pour that over your chicken, making sure every single piece is completely coated. And then ideally you would let this marinate in your fridge overnight, but I'm just gonna give it about an hour. All right, and after a full episode of Love Island,
I have a secret to tell you.
Mommy?
Deep saute pan on your stove, completely cold. Now go ahead and place your chicken thighs skin side down in your pan, spread out evenly. Now you're gonna slowly turn your heat up. I mean,
real slow.
Take your time, work it up to low, bring it up to medium, bring it up to medium high. You wanna give it time for the fat and the skin to render out. That's gonna be our lubricant on our pan. Obviously we didn't put any oil in, so if it doesn't render out properly, then everything's gonna stick and everything's gonna be sad. And as it's starting to heat up, don't be afraid to move your chicken around so that way you have even browning on all sides. Because if not, you'll end up with this. And also, if you're one of those people who are like, I'm not gonna take it slow, I'm just gonna do this really fast, because I'm that person, don't do it. Because remember, there's fresh garlic in here. Fresh garlic burns and gets real gross. So don't do it. After about 10 minutes on low, you're gonna move it to medium, and that's when you're really gonna start to hear that sizzle. Then once your chicken is nice and charred and a little bit sticky, just like that, go ahead and flip them all over and let them cook a little bit more on this side. And don't worry about cooking them all the way through, because we're actually going to remove them and then put them back on top of the rice while that cooks, and that'll help steam and bring them up to temp. And if you notice that you're smelling char pretty quickly, turn your heat down a little bit. Odds are you're too high and you're burning your soy and your garlic, and you don't want that. Remember, this one is a game of patience. Finally, after about 10 minutes on this side, you're gonna go ahead and just remove them and then kill your heat. Now this next part is dependent on whether or not you actually burned your garlic. It happens, it's okay, it's not the end of the world, but if you did, you're gonna wanna rinse out your pan. You're gonna wanna get it all cleaned out so that way you don't have a burnt garlic rice. That would suck. In my case, I didn't burn it, so I'm good to just plow on through the next step, which is rice. Starting with 2 American cups of rice, because there's a difference. If you're using the rice cooker cups, those are different. A rice cooker cup is actually equivalent to like 3/4 American cup. It's very different, and it can mess you up. So these are 2 American cups. And then similar to the potatoes, you're just gonna wanna give it a few rinses to get all the excess starch off of it. As you can see, that water is gross and really, really starchy. So just rinse it. After 3 or 4 rinses and it's mostly clear, you can go ahead and add it to your pot, making sure you scrape down the edges because you don't want to waste any. That would just be a bummer. And then to that, you're going to add 2 1/4 cup of clean water. Now I'm just going to give that a little mix just to get it all even and get some of that flavor off the bottom mixed into the top. You want your rice mostly even, because if you have a peak and a low spot, then your rice won't cook evenly. Then we're just going to gently place our chicken back on top, making sure not to disturb our rice. Well, you're gonna disturb it a little bit, so just do your best to not disturb it more than necessary. Just like that, nice and even. Then we're just gonna offset a lid and then bring it up to a boil. And while we wait for this to boil, it feels like a great time to tell you about my recent medical diagnoses. Found out that I have plantar fasciitis, and I gotta wear these real supportive slippers. So if you or someone you know has plantar fasciitis and have some suggestions as to not have hurt feet all day, please tell me, please. And now once your rice has started to boil, well, not your rice, your water, you're gonna go ahead and cover it and reduce your heat down to low and let this cook untouched for 15 minutes. No touch. And now that you've patiently waited that 15 minutes, you can go ahead and peek under the lid a little bit, see if there's any water remaining. In my case, there is, so I'm gonna go ahead and cover it back up and let it continue cooking until that water is completely gone. And the way to get around all of this babysitting, if you don't wanna deal with it, is just buy a rice cooker. Because if you own a rice cooker, then you could technically speaking just do this in a rice cooker. Granted, searing your chicken inside the rice cooker is not as feasible due to size constrictions, but it can be done. But I also know the rice cookers are expensive, so you don't have to have one. You can do it in a pan, pot, well, a tall pan. It's been about another 6 minutes. We're gonna go ahead and check it. Oh yeah, beautiful. There's no more liquid, the rice is cooked, but now we need to wait one more time. Go Go ahead and kill your heat, cover it, and just let it sit for another 10 minutes. And if you don't, I'll be very disappointed in you. But you will, so like there's no need to worry. And what kind of meal would it be if I didn't forget till the very last minute to cut up some green onion? Are you happy now that I'm looking at these? Is that what you wanted? Is that what you wanted me to do? You wanted me to look while I was cutting? And now after patiently waiting all this time, we can finally reveal our masterpiece. Looks pretty good. Ow, that lid is very hot. Let's try a little bit of that. It's good. Our chicken, perfectly cooked. Technically speaking, a little bit overcooked, but that's okay because the way we cooked it, it should retain a ton of its moisture. And then we'll top it off with our green onions. And there you go, soy glazed chicken. And finally, to finish it off, a creamy tomato pasta with shrimp. With shrimp. It's gonna be a good time. Starting with about a ½ pound of shrimp, peeled and deveined. Mine are neither peeled nor deveined, so I'm just gonna have to do that first. You could arguably leave them on if you want. I know a lot of people like to do that. In my experience, if you're gonna be eating them in a pasta, just peel them and devein them first. It's not worth the effort. And by effort, I mean the effort when you're in the middle of eating. And for seasoning, we're gonna go super simple here. A little bit of olive oil, a little garlic powder, a little cayenne pepper. If you don't like spicy, don't use cayenne pepper, use smoked paprika instead. Same color, not as spicy. A nice pinch of salt, and a few cranks of pepper. We'll give that a good toss, just to make sure everything's nice and coated. And we'll set that to the side. Now we're just gonna roughly crush and chop some garlic. Doesn't have to be big, doesn't have to be small. You want it rough and you want it even. That's all that matters. Then we're gonna finely mince half a shallot. You can also just do one shallot if it's tiny. We're just gonna carefully slice down the belly, making sure to watch our fingertips. And then we're just gonna go lengthwise, next to it, lengthwise again. And just keep going all the way down. Then square it up and thinly slice to get nice, tiny dice. Like that. And don't stress if you can't go fast. Take it slow. Now you're just gonna fill your pot with water. I'm using a saucier because it's a little bit wider and not as tall. If you have one, great. If not, you can just use a regular pot. It's fine. Either way, bring that up to a boil. And then once your water starts to boil, add in a hefty pinch of salt, add in a second hefty pinch of salt. I'm gonna give that a quick stir just to make sure it's all dissolved. And then add in your pasta, which if you're looking for good pasta, look for something with 2 ingredients, flour and water. That's it. And then cook according to your package directions because they're gonna be different for everybody. Mine, 9 minutes. And now that my timer's up, there's 2 ways you can check your pasta. There's a way that everybody knows, right? You can throw your piece of pasta at the wall and see if it sticks. That's boring. What you should do is just eat it. Because it's a much more effective way to know if your pasta's done. Mine's done, I need to remove it now. I'm just gonna go ahead and remove it from the water. Now you can dump the water. And really quickly, before we move on to the shrimp, go ahead and toss your pasta with just the lightest amount of olive oil, like seriously, super light. You just don't want it to stick to itself, but you also don't want so much that the sauce doesn't stick to it. Now bring your pot back up to about medium-high heat, drizzle in a little bit of olive oil, and then drop in your shrimp. You wanna make sure they're all evenly spread out, so there's nice and even coverage, and then just let them sit. Let them cook on that first side. Once they've started to curl a little bit, you're gonna wanna flip them all over. Some of these have started to curl, so I'm just gonna go ahead and flip them. You don't need too hard of a sear on these. Look at that color. That's what you want. It's not too much, it's not too little. It's just enough to make you say, I'm gonna eat that. And once those all have some nice color and a little bit of curl, go ahead and remove. All right, we're gonna reduce our heat down to medium-low and drop in a whole stick of Kerrygold unsalted butter. You want unsalted because you wanna be able to control the amount of salt you're using. If you're not using unsalted, it's okay. I mean, you just have less control of the salt content, but whatever you want to do, whatever, don't yell at me. Give that butter a good mix. Make sure you get all that butter melted, all that flavor inside your pot from the shrimp. And then once you've got a nice layer of melted butter, you can add in your garlic and shallots. You just want to sweat these out. You don't want them to burn. You just want to get that flavor going. You want it to be nice and aromatic, not burnt. And once that butter's melted, make sure you keep all of it moving. You just want the flavors to come out. Be nice and gentle. Even turn that heat down a little bit because I had mine too hot, but yours was probably set correctly. You've got a little bit of color. That butter is getting a little bit browned. Just like that, that's what you want. And now we're gonna add in our heavy cream. I'm adding about 2 cups to this. And I'm just gonna mix this up, get it all nice and incorporated. Then you see all those little speckles, all those little dots, that's all flavor that's building into our sauce. Totally forgot tomato paste. You should have added this in before you added your cream because you want to toast it off, but that's okay. We're adding it now. About a tablespoon of that. It's totally okay, mistakes happen. You know what, it's still gonna taste good. Get that tomato paste broken up, because you don't want like a chunk of tomato paste in your sauce, that would suck. Once you've got that tomato paste all incorporated, you're just going to let it come up to a simmer, nice and easy. And make sure you keep it moving because you don't want any of it to burn right in the center. In my case, all my heat comes from the center, so I need to make sure it stays moving. And then after it's simmered for a while and thickened up, turn it down just a hair, then grate in some fresh Parmigiano Reggiano. And this part is like Olive Garden. I can tell you exactly how much I put into it, but realistically speaking, you can add however much you want. You're an adult, you do you. Then just fold all that cheese in, mix it all together until it's nicely melted and incorporated. And this is a good time to go ahead and taste it to make sure your salt is good. Mine is not, I need more salt, which makes sense because I didn't salt it earlier. It's what it is. You should be salting as you cook, but sometimes your ADHD takes over and you just forget. Much better. So much good. So much good. And now that that sauce is right where you want it, I'm gonna go ahead and toss in a couple of these sun-dried tomatoes because I think they'll add a nice little pop. And now that those are all nicely mixed in, go ahead and add back in your pasta. Go ahead and fold it all together. And then because you want to plate it real nice, you're gonna go ahead and move it over to a cleaner pot. So technically speaking, it's no longer a one-pot meal, but that's okay because I'm the one who's doing the dishes and not you. And then I know I said we were gonna mix them in before, but I really wanna just put them right on top, our shrimp. And then we'll finish it off with another round of freshly grated Parmigiano Reggiano. Creamy tomato pasta with shrimp. And this, my friends, is arguably the easiest and the most rewarding of anything we made all day. Oh yeah. And with that, I say thank you so much for liking, subscribing, and hitting that bell. I appreciate every single one of you, and I will see you next week.